Hey everyone, we are here again with our video series. What am I calling this? I have no idea. This kind of came off the cuff, but we're here in New Jersey with Lawrence to ask me 3 questions. Lawrence works for a nonprofit out in New Jersey. I'm so excited that he could join me here for this. So what is your first question you're going to throw at me?
So when you first started working as a funeral professional and you were going through mortuary school, what was your concern emotionally about working and preparing maybe a family member or a close friend?
I think I probably have a different vantage point because I had worked in the business going to school, where there's a lot of people I think go into school never having done prep work or working around a funeral home. But I had at that point had been working around a funeral home like 6 years or something. So I had been around a lot. And I think some of my interaction with family and friends having died during that time is what propelled me to know I wanted to do what I was doing. So I think coming at it from a little different than what I think a lot of people would more have fear and anxiety thinking about those moments where, I attended a visitation before I was doing my apprenticeship and had skill and saw somebody and was like, oh my gosh, they look horrible. I could have done better. And I don't even have training yet in the full, capacity. So it made me want to do better for the people I care about, because I feel like if I'm skilled at something and I'm trained in something, then I should be the one that does it, whether it's an emotional thing or not. I know there's times that I'm not going to be, there's going to be close family members, but my feeling is like, that's where I was called to work. Not that it's a religious or a spiritual or anything, but like, this is what I do. And so I should just do that kind of thing. So it's more, I don't know. It's my station in life, or I don't know what you want to call it, but I would think that if I had, a family member who had accounting questions and I was an accountant, which would be the last thing I would ever be in this world, probably that and a drain cleaner. I would think that they would probably call me and want me to help them or do their taxes or whatever need be. So I feel like this is my duty, if you want to say that. So I don't know that I even worried about it while I was in school and everything. I think I thought more about where was I going to land after school, and where was I going to be happiest, and how was I going to get along with who I worked for, and what was the next phase of my life going to look like. I think I was more worried about marriage and kids and that part of my life working out, because I feel like I knew this part of my life, and I felt safe in finding my job and what I was going to do. The rest of everything seemed not in place yet. So that part of it, I don't think I worried about any of those, what is to come, because I felt so good in it, if that makes sense. Yeah.
So my next question would be a different aspect compared to when you first started out. It would be more like, so how would you go about preparing a body of someone who had been on death row and was executed versus somebody that was a cancer patient and had gone through chemo?
In the preparation, or if it was an electric chair, it'd be just like anybody else getting electrocuted. I don't think it changes. We as professionals have to step back and just assess the deceased, not who they were, because that body is no longer the person. It's the shell, essentially. Goodness, I heard it's not the candy, it's the wrapper. Somebody said that the other day, and I was like, that's the coolest thing ever. So whether it was a rotten piece of candy or not, it's just the wrapper that's left over, I guess. If they die on death row, they're going to go to get an autopsy. So it's kind of the standard autopsy preparation, if that's what they want. The family may choose cremation. And so it's kind of the same path. I think I talked recently in a video about there's a theory called a glimmer, that everybody was a glimmer in somebody's eye. And so that person was important to somebody, just, it doesn't matter if there's one person left alive that person was important to. I think I would care for them the same way. I may not love it. I may not, but I'm doing it for the family that's still living that cared for that individual. It's a hard thing. It's so back when I think it was the Boston bomber after the Boston Marathon, the gentleman that had died, one of the bombers that had died, nobody would take his body. He was turned away by funeral home after funeral home after funeral home. And if I'm remembering the whole thing correctly, because of his faith, it was a situation where he needed to be buried within a certain time frame and such. And finally, a funeral home cared for him. I get we all have personal, what we believe and what we don't believe, but, his family was not the ones at fault for what he did. And they just wanted to care for him and do what they should do for him after loving him his whole life. And I should be able to give them that right to do that, is my belief. But obviously all professionals don't feel that way, but we didn't go into a business to professionally decide. I know there was was it a Grey's Anatomy episode about some murder or something, came in for a surgery and they all argued over if they should do the surgery or not because they didn't want to save his life, or I don't remember the situation, or maybe it wasn't even Grey's Anatomy, but it just, a lot of morals and ethics I think come into play. But at the end of the day, we chose a vocation and that's what we do, and it's not about my choices. So, and as long as animals aren't getting massacred while I'm, slaughtered and what's it called, sacrificed, I'm good. I'm good. So, but it would be the same as anybody else. Just go through the steps, I guess, and do what you do.
Can I ask a follow-up on that?
Of course.
So how would you go about, since it would be mostly chemical injection with the death penalty, how would you go about balancing out the chemicals I use in the embalming room for the body? How would you figure out that chemistry?
That's a super smart question, actually. I would, if it was the first person, we don't have the death penalty here. I would, if I was for the first time doing this, I would reach out to our community of embalmers and say, hey, who's cared for somebody that died from lethal injection? What can you tell me about chemical response? And kind of go from there. So I would go right to sources of people who have maybe handled individuals. Is like Texas, I think, is a big death penalty state. Am I wrong there? Anyway, I don't know my death penalty laws, obviously, very good. But that's what I would do, is tap into some of that and just use what was there. Otherwise, I would inject and see what the response was and go from there. Just like with a chemo patient, as you were talking before, or, someone that's on a high medication regimen, we don't always know what that person's taking. We don't know how things are going to respond. We could do an embalming, person looks perfect, come back a couple hours later and a completely different result. The body could be completely loose, gray colored, that the chemicals responded while they were interacting with each other and everything went to heck. So all we can do is our best. And if we see, fluid distribution isn't going to one area, then we circumvent and raise another artery, or hypo-inject, which is using like a little, it looks like a baby trocar, and you hook it up to the machine and you turn on inject. And so you take that little needle and go in the skin tissue and kind of channel it in. So it's, rather than injecting it through the veins and arteries, you're going just into the tissue, injecting some preservative fluid and trying to just get it to be in there in different areas. So that would be my bet. I would call the other professionals and then just do my best and see what would happen with what I would do. So I think it would help because they would be autopsied as well. Autopsy really, when someone's been autopsied, it really takes out the central mechanism of the body, and you're left with a head to inject, 2 arms, and a legs, because the whole center is completely hollowed out. And so that makes it a lot easier to embalm someone who's been through any trauma or any situation, because we don't have to wonder what's going on under the skin and the cavity. So that would help as well.
Interesting.
Good follow-up question, though. That's really smart.
And then my last question would be, where do you see the funeral industry going as a business in 10 years?
Oh, goodness. I have always said I think it's going to cycle back around as a business to being a little more traditional. I think a lot of people think we're just going to see cremation being like 100% or something off the charts. But I see that traditionalism within our society, weddings and everything, it's still there. There's this core to who we are, that there's always this semblance of a traditional something there. No matter what else changes, there's still this baseline. I think as we see, so it used to always be, this traditional burial. Then we factored in this cremation, and that's been going for a little while, and it's rising. But rather than, this cremation being this thing that you could also do, people were taking it to the extreme to direct cremation, which meant no service. So let's say, we'll take you for example. Let's say, like your ancestors on the wall behind you, we were talking about, they were, let's say, all traditional services. Well, then their children decided that for themselves, they were going to do direct cremation. So like for your grandparents, I'm going to assume a lot of those are your great grandparents, some of them. And so then yes, for your grandparents, let's say your parents said, well, we're going to do a direct cremation. No service. It's fine. We're just going to have them cremated and move on. You go about your life feeling like, I don't really love that choice because I feel like something was missing. Like I would have liked to have had a gathering for Grandpa. I would have liked to have had a time that we got together and we celebrated him, and I got to see his, some pictures and just whatever that looked like that you feel like you wanted, you didn't get a chance to do because of a choice your parents made. So then now cycle down, when your parents die, that's going to impact the choice you have. So whether you choose cremation or not, you might now build on, I want to have a full traditional viewing. I want to gather my friends with me. I need to be surrounded by people. Then we can follow with cremation, because that is what mom and dad wanted. But I really need to have people with me, and I need to have a gathering of some kind or whatever. So I think there's this psychological thing that's happening with the direct cremation, that people are feeling a little bit of a void. And I think this COVID time is spurring that even more, where people are forced to not get to have services and support and things. There's always going to be the people who don't have anything, but I believe, and I could be wrong, in 10 years, you're going to be like, whoa, that Kari was really wrong. But I believe it's going to cycle where people feel the need to do more. It's not going to keep going less. I think it's going to be more. So as funeral directors, we need to be more problem solvers and situation presenters. That when we have a family in front of us that wants to choose cremation as a disposition option, that we don't just assume they want direct cremation as a service choice. We can help present them with something that fits their needs. That if they want to have a traditional viewing and then cremation, or they want to have a gathering at the flower garden down the road or something, or whatever it may be, we help them find a new situation that meets their needs. Because a lot of directors, I think right now from the older generation, are fighting changing the vision of what a funeral might look like. That it doesn't just need to be a traditional setup in the chapel or at a church and then a graveside. It can be a viewing out in a barn, like weddings are all happening, and hay bales and whatever it is, and then Bud Light reception, or it can look different but still be a funeral, and we can still be the ones that are helping it all be organized, because we are event planners at the end of the day, that we get the permits, we process, we get everything done. And so we have to just continue that and evolve with it. But it's that generation that in 10 years will have cycled out that I think are just stuck in not wanting to flow with it. So I think consumers are going to start wanting more, and funeral directors are going to start being more out of the box thinkers. That seems like a really long answer to your question, but
No, it actually makes a lot of sense, because I've been to more funerals and viewings than I ever cared to imagine going to.
yeah.
So having that closure by seeing the body being prepared and laying in the casket and then going to the cemetery and seeing the burial just helps with the healing process. Even after 5-10 years, it still helps to cope with them not being here.
When I think as people, we like to be part of things. We want to be involved. We want to show support. And like right now, we're finding that it's hard to show support when we're in lockdown. You know, hey, like right now, my friend from like middle school, her dad just died 3 weeks ago. He was part of my whole youth, you know, spending nights at their house, like seeing him when I go back to my little hometown and stuff. And he died and I couldn't be there. I couldn't, you know, be the person for her. I couldn't see her family. I couldn't see her kids, her husband, any of them. And that has been kind of hard. I'm not the one that lost somebody, but I couldn't be in the role I wanted to be in as a support person. And I think that's really hard for people. And we want to just gather and support and be there, whether we're going to see the deceased or not. That just gather time is really important for people and for us as humans, as we see this isolation is just mentally incapacitating a lot of people. And so I think adding grief, adding loss and all of this, and it's not a good mix. So I think it will, rally a little bit more movement towards people attending and showing support and gathering. And like you said, that time where you go through that with somebody, because we're starved of it right now. And when you starve, then you're going to binge and almost go over the top. And we're going to start going to every funeral we can, like we didn't even know them. Let's just go to the funeral. Not really, but it's kind of what we do. We starve and then we binge. And so I think there's going to be an overflow following at some point of support and love and, showing up for people in a lot of ways, not just funerals, but, we're going to every birthday party, everything, and we're going to go big and I think it's important to do. And, if 6 months ago somebody had said, hey, will you do a drive-by birthday party for my, drive by and show support for my kid who's having a birthday, I don't think a lot of people would have done it, because they would have been like, oh, we'll just see him at school next week, or, oh, we'll do this. But the fact that people are doing the most insane things, like hanging out of their cars with signs and, like dropping off baskets of wine and goodies to other moms who you don't even know. And like people just want to vomit love on everyone right now, which is not a bad thing at all. So, yeah, that's my 2 cents. Well, good. Well, thank you for 3 questions. Those were great. I'm always nervous. Like, what are people going to throw at me in these question things? What if I'm going to be stumped? One of these times I'm going to be stumped and my face is going to show it that I'm like, crap. But for now, you guys are doing really good with questions. I'm very impressed. Very impressed. So is there any other question you really just deeply needed to ask? FaceTime. You look like you're nervous, like you're bouncing the whole time.
So I do have some more questions that I've always been curious about, mainly more like personal ones.
Okay.
So 10 years ago, my godfather unexpectedly passed away. He was 39. And he went through, they did the autopsy and everything to find out cause of death. When we went to the funeral home for the viewing, his face had kind of some discoloration and bruising on it, on his, and I've never understood if that was because of the embalming or because he was in the refrigeration for a period of time. I never found closure from that.
Okay. So where did he die?
In his apartment. He fell. He got up. We're thinking to go to the restroom, and then he fell and had a heart attack.
Oh my gosh. Okay. And how long was he there for? Somebody found him.
I think it was about 7 or 8 hours.
Okay. Well, that would explain the discoloration because he more than likely was face first. And
yes.
If nothing else, if he wasn't completely face first, he was going to be on one side at least. And all the blood is going to pool, especially with a heart attack. Kind of blood rushes. And a lot of times what you'll see with people who have heart attacks is their faces get really dark and beet red because of circulation and everything. And so if he's laying on his face, it's going to pool quickly and you're going to get that staining, which doesn't always come out. There's now chemicals that we can use that bleach out the skin from inside a little bit more, and we can get some of that. There's a new one called Hexy, which a lot of people are using, and it just almost like a phenol type thing where it just bleaches out from the inside, and it works really good, but that wasn't available back then, and it doesn't always work. But just getting the blood moving doesn't get it out of that stained tissue. And cosmetics, people are not always great at them. And even if you put heavy cosmetics, it may bleed through after a while. It just, for some reason, you would think since the skin's not oily and there's no heat, makeup would just stay, but it doesn't for whatever reason. It's kind of weird sometimes. So I would guess that it was because he laid for an extended period of time. Typically the autopsy isn't going to create, anything nose or your face, but that laying is definitely going to do it. I had a girl this last year, she had overdosed and she laid in the bathroom and the roommate said she was only in there for overnight, maybe 7-8 hours. It was probably more like 12, but I think she was also near a heat vent maybe. She was in such a state of decomposition after that shorter period of time because I think the heat vent was on near her. I could not believe her skin was just sloughing off, just a horrible state that she was in. So 7-8 hours doesn't seem like a long time, but a lot can happen in that period, especially depending on the temperatures in the room. If it was summer, winter, if they were all bundled up, if they were hot and sweaty before it happened, and they had a fever before, all these things come into play with how that body starts to deteriorate. As soon as that heart stops, that bacteria goes to work. It's instant. So I would say that is just that time period could have created that darkening. Even if they had found him after an hour or two, he could have still had some darkening that may not have cleared up. He could have had bruising from falling on his face. An adult person falling from a full standing, not catching themselves, is a huge impact to a face, which we don't realize how bad of breaking and bruising and things that could be. And even if he just took a few more breaths after he fell, or his heartbeat just for a little bit, it would have rushed blood to those areas that bruised, and they would have bruised up really quickly as well. So I think a lot of that could have come into play. My guessing, without seeing him and just knowing the situation and seeing situations over time, that's my professional analysis, I guess. I don't know. Yeah.
Okay.
It's a hard memory for you to carry and wonder what was going on when that's not how he usually looked. And
yeah, that one was hard. I've been going to funerals since I'm about 1.5 years old.
Which is great. I love that you have exposure, and that's it helps things settle into your body when you see, and it's going to suck no matter what. Nothing takes suckage. I'm going to make a hat that says nothing takes away the suckage. Like it sucks no matter what you do, whether you skip the funeral, whether you skip viewing, whether you skip anything, it doesn't change that it just fracking sucks when somebody dies. It doesn't stop the hurt. It doesn't make it easier. It just sucks.
Yeah. And ever since then, I've been wanting to learn more and more about death. So when I found your channel a couple of years ago, it was an instant subscribe because I just kept watching.
Oh, nice. Well, thank you, Lawrence. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate those are some really good questions. I know some of them are personal and, come from a place of loss for yourself, but really smart questions, especially about the lethal injection. I'm kind of impressed by that one. That was good. So thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Kari.
Yeah. Bye, everybody.